Hey there, aspiring guitarist. This week's chord progression is going to be a little different. We're not going to follow a three pattern chord progression from the circle of fifths, although the circle of fifths is great and we're going to continue to do more. You can see my fret light here and see if you can figure out what that chord is. And then we just added a whoop, there we are. There's a chord, there's a chord. That is an E minor, and that is an E minor 7. So we know that our E minor is made up here in the second fret. Let me slide over where you can see them. And then the seventh is added simply by adding, let me slide it where you can see it. We add the pinky or the third to the third fret, second string. Now, there's some more we can do to this chord progression, and I'm going to see if you can figure it out for part two. We're here on an E minor, then we jump to E minor 7. By just moving the bottom finger, the pinky or the third that we've got down here on the third fret, somewhere we get another chord that's a variation of the E. So instead of just E to E minor, we get E to E minor to what? We'll talk about that in part two. And we're also going to talk about the different ways you can do this. We can make the E minor up here with 2 and 3, or we could make it with 1 and 2. Now, when we do the E minor 7, by adding this down here, see it pop up? There it went, just popped up where I said the pinky or the third. There's different ways to get to that last E form. Remember, we've got an E, E minor, we've got an E minor 7, and there's another one that we can get an E variation. It's an E minor variation just by moving this one that's anchored here on the third. So see if you can figure out where it goes to. Now, what we're also going to talk about in part two is where you can jump off to other chords from an E minor. Chord progressions are great. It's good if you're in the key of C to know that there's an F and a G major, and most likely an E minor, an A minor, a D minor, a B seventh, using, remember our circle of fifths. Here's one of the circle of fifths wheel. We've also got the chord wheel book. But there's, while we're here. So what I mean by that is while we're at the E minor, while we're at this good old E minor, let's stay with that a little while before we venture into, another chord, an E, an E to an A to a D, some of the other things. There's all kind of things we can do with just the E minor, and we can stay anchored with the second and third, the middle and the ring finger, or the index and the middle finger, depending on how we make it. And we can stay anchored in full or in part and either add a finger to get another chord, or we can take away a finger to get a chord, or we can actually move to a different chord by keeping part of the anchor, and that would mean one finger instead of two. So there's different things we can do with chords. And the more you figure out how you can anchor and go from chord to chord, it'll really help you in a lot of ways. It'll help you in playing a fast song because you learn how to quickly change chords. And it also helps you to experiment with a chord itself to find out what notes are in the chord, how they arrive at a major, a minor, a seventh, a sixth, a fifth, an augmented, an add this, an add nine, a sus. And I know all that may seem Greek to you at first, but You've heard me say it many times. Chords are important. They don't have to be boring. You can actually make an entire acoustical song staying in an E minor and E form and learning how to do different variations of dropping fingers, adding fingers, hammering on, and just really exploring the chord. And we can do it with any chord. I invite you, when you practice, don't just, when you make an E minor, don't just strum it. Add some things. There's other things you can add. You can drop. Well, let me drop down here and add my index finger on the second string, first fret. Let's see what that sounds like. Who's watching? I mean, if you have to, lock yourself in a closet and experiment. The more you experiment with a chord and lifting up, lifting down, adding a finger, taking away a finger, looking, ooh, I can go to a G from here. Ooh, I can go to a C without moving everything. Ooh, I can get to this. Wait a minute. And then when I get to this, that's part of the circle of fifths, 1, 4, 5 chord progression. Things are going to start to open up. So while we're going to continue to do 3 chord progressions, and we're going to base them on the circle of fifths, we're going to hang around on some of the chords. If we're at E, we're going to see what all we can do with E. If we're on a D, we're going to see what all we can do with a D. We're going to also find out if we're on an F, we're going to find different ways to make an F. We're going to learn what shape that, hey, we got an E shape, we drop down, we got an A minor shape. We move that around using the musical alphabet. We can play chords all up and down the neck. It's a magic that opens up, that begins with chords. Chords have gotten a bad rap. A lot of times they'll say, well, no, you need to move on to power chords, or you need to do bar chords. Well, yeah, I love power chords. I love bar chords. I love being able to go up and down the neck, use different chord voicings, which is just a different way to play a chord. Don't forget, a chord is simply 3 notes. You can have more than 3 notes. Sometimes the notes repeat depending on the type of chord, the key of the chord, things like that. But chords, there's a reason we learn chords. You don't have to learn them all. There's a lot of argument that goes on. Well, you need to learn these chords. You need to learn that chord. You need to learn the other chord. I want to play with chords. Different people do different things. I'm a finger style mainly guitarist. That doesn't mean that I discount rhythm, or I haven't learned how to play a bar chord and move up and down the F and get up and down the fretboard and get an F, a G, an A, a B, a C, and on, and then take the A shape and get different chords from that. But I also don't want to lose open chords up here in the first position and up here in the low register as opposed to the high register. I'm not saying one's better than the other. Different people hang out in different places. Some hang out up here more than others. Some people hang out here. Some people hit the middle. Some people combine it all. That's what's great about the guitar, is you can do so many things. So we're going to play with chords and try to get the most out of every chord. That's where you'll also learn arpeggio, bass lines, little riffs that go with chords, leads that come from a chord shape, and things like that. So don't discount the beauty of a chord. So see if you can figure out, I gave you an E minor, I gave you an E minor 7. See if you can figure out that third E minor what. And we'll have a part 2 later in the week, more toward the end of the week. Thanks for watching. I hope your guitar journey is blessed. And most of all, hey there, happy picking.